In this special episode, I'm visited by Coach Eugene Teo, who was in Denmark in June to host his muscle mechanics workshop. You may know him from Instagram, but if not, I'm really sure you'll like him. He's a former bodybuilder, and for many years he has been a strength coach and educator within the field of training and nutrition. Unfortunately, the sound of the episode is affected by a cable being broken inside, which caused a buzzing sound, and my microphone did not record my voice. I have repaired the sound as well as I was able to, and I believe it's acceptable, although of course the sound would have been better without the cable being broken. In the episode, we talk about lessons from bodybuilding used in the general population and for pain, how there is no right or wrong way to move, the 3 biggest mistakes Eugene sees people doing with their training and nutrition, the distinction between pain and performance when working with lifting technique. Without further ado, here's my talk with Eugene Teo. Stærk og smertefri er podcasten for dig, som vil lære mere om styrketræning, smerte, kost og sundhed på en nuanceret måde uden magiske løfter. Jeg er din vært, Jakob Bjermann fra maxer.dk, og jeg håber, at du vil nyde denne episode. Welcome, Eugene.
Welcome. Thank you. Thank you for welcoming me.
And thanks for coming.
I'm really excited about this.
We were in Aarhus this weekend.
Yes.
Where you were teaching your course, Muscle Mechanics, and I thought we have to get this knowledge and you as a person a bit more famous here in Denmark.
Well,
so
thank you.
One way to do that could be to do the podcast, and I like the ideas you presented, so I thought, why not do it here? But before we get into that, maybe you could tell us a bit about yourself.
Right. So, by trade, I'm a personal trainer. So I've worked for many years as personal trainer since going on a bit over 10 years now. And just through over the years of working with a lot of people, working with myself, making a lot of mistakes as well, I've slowly been very fortunate to be in the position I am now. Right now, I don't train many clients anymore. I do have a few people who I work with, but more so I take on this role of helping to educate others, and in terms of their movement, in terms of how they go about training themselves or other people, how they go about making for a better coaching experience as personal trainers. But overall, like, if I really had to sum up sort of like what it is that I'm doing now, because I do get asked that a fair bit by people, because I see stuff on Instagram, like, oh, I must be doing some weird stuff as an influencer. It's, I just help people solve their problems. That's what I always see myself as. If somebody comes to me and their problem is, hey, I want to build muscle mass, I say, okay, let's work on finding out a resolution to that. Their problem is, I can't scratch my back without my shoulder want to pop out of its socket because I'm just so stiff and immobile. Okay, that's another problem. Let's try to work on that. Or it's a typical body composition, whatever it is. And again, it sounds quite simple. When somebody comes to you and says, look, I want to increase my bench press as a powerlifter, and say, okay, I'm going to give you some bench press technique, or I'm going to give you a program for powerlifting. But then I find the fun part comes down to, it's not always just that. When somebody says to you they need to improve their bench press, the question you should, like, I know that you ask would be, why haven't they progressed it yet? Or what problems do they really have? The problem isn't just the bench press. That's what's manifested as an issue in their eyes. But really, there's probably going to be 3 or 4 other things you've got to unpack.
Like pain in the shoulder, lack of mobility in the thoracic spine. Or...
Yeah. And there are so many other avenues, and that's where I get excited. And that's what I try to help people connect the dots to. Say, yes, to improve your bench press, you probably have to bench press more. That's going to help most of the time. And it's going to be part of most people's answer to solving their problem. But alongside that, or maybe before that, or at the same time as that, what needs to happen is everything else, the thoracic mobility, or the lats, the mid-back, the rhomboids. Maybe if they are in pain, helping them resolve that, helping them with everything else that packs into that bench press. I mean, it could be as simple as saying they need to improve maybe their hip mobility, they get more of an arch. Who knows? And that's where it differs for each person. But that's where it's fun in my eyes. And that's where I try to get people excited about thinking a little bit deeper. at a surface level, a lot of what I do, people see it as unorthodox or strange. Like, why are you doing this weird circus stuff on Instagram? But then when they start to connect those dots, like, oh, this is why he's doing this as the first step or the second step in the process of the squat or the bench press or whatever else it may be.
Yeah, that's actually one of the things that I in particular enjoyed in your introduction of the course. That you could emphasize on understanding why you do something.
Yeah.
Could you elaborate a bit on that?
Well, it's something that was drilled into me from a very, very young age as a trainer or as an athlete myself, where many years ago I was actively competing in bodybuilding, and that was all I really cared about. So again, I had a very, very good coach at the time. He was this old school guy, very, very rough around the edges, tough guy. And we would do an exercise, and he would always say to me, what are you feeling? Like, where's the pump? Where's the blood flow? And then he would say, why? Why do you think it's there? Or I come down and say, my shoulder's hurting. He would he'd give me a solution to help resolve it, but he would say, why did it work the way it did? Or for your training partner, why did it not work for him? So I always had that in my mind of trying to ask that question, why? Whereas everything I come across now, I'm always trying to explain it. And I think that's something that I think a lot of people are missing, because a lot of people, just in the need to be very, very efficient in the use of their time, they want to say, oh, your shoulder hurts, do this. I'm like, okay, I'll go do that. Or they'll say, hey, you want to increase your chest size, do this exercise. Okay, I'll go do that. And there's no real explanation or thought process behind it. I'm sure most of the time the person telling the instruction of saying, do this for your chest, knows why it is, but they may not have the time or the patience or even the ability to bring that message across. And that's where there's that mismatch that I see. It becomes people just blindly following orders without then really trying to say, why does it work, or why should I do this and not that? And they don't really understand the concepts. So that's part of what I really think is important, is not the exercises, not the program, not the sets and reps, but more so understanding the underlying concepts. Because importantly, if you understand the underlying concepts of how these things should be working in the body, then you can make up your own stuff. Then you can understand everything. You can connect the dots yourselves. And when you forget, like I say in class, when you forget everything I teach you, you'll retain the why or the how. You'll be able to make it up again.
The way of thought.
Yeah. And you'll be able to make it even better than what I teach, probably.
Yeah, because what I at least experience is, especially on social media, a lot of people are looking for the specific exercise. And I think you said something along the lines of, your problem is not about the lack of one specific exercise.
Yeah, no, exactly right. And I'll tell you what, I'm partly guilty of that. I'm part of the problem, because at a cursory glance, you scroll through my Instagram, I was like, oh, here's a cool exercise for shoulders. And here are 10 others he's posted in the last month. And here's 30 others for glutes or for hamstrings or whatever. I want to do all of them. And it really appeals to the ADD part of everyone's brain of like, ooh, new shiny new object, when they go on and do it.
And the fear of not doing.
And the FOMO, the fear of missing out. You know, like, I'm not going to do this exercise, I'm going to miss out on the...
I don't have any gains.
Yeah, I'll miss out on the gains, or I'll miss out on at least just being able to jump on the bandwagon or whatever. So that can be seen as part of creating that issue. And that's where I try to be very thorough in my explanation, saying, like, this is why I do the exercise. Hopefully people can read through and understand that as well and make a more informed decision. But it could very easily become just a bag of party tricks. Like, here's 100 exercises, go knock yourself out. But I really want people to start thinking more about, where does it fit? Why does it fit the way it does? Who is it not appropriate for as well? Which I think is a very good question people should ask me all the time is, hey, it's a cool exercise. It really felt great for me, but who is it not good for and why? Yeah.
More of the context of an exercise.
Yeah.
Understanding the background, the reasoning behind choosing one exercise.
Yeah.
But I guess it's also as a field, here we call it personal trainers, physios and so on, we've been thinking about when you have a specific pain or issue, you have to do a specific exercise. But now the literature has been showing time and time again, specific exercises for your rotator cuff, for your back pain, for your hip. It doesn't work any better than general exercises.
Yeah. It honestly never made sense to me, because the fact is, we are all human. We all do have similar structures as a skeleton. but we are all so different. There are huge variances in all of our hardwares of our muscle system, our skeletal system. So how could one external rotation with a band be universal for everybody's rotator cuff? It simply can't be, because even if we had the exact same structure, the exact same skeletal system, exact same muscular system, we still have very, very different software in the brain controlling it all. And we also have different experiences. You know, who's to say that what's working for a baseball pitcher is going to be the same for the desk worker or the stay-at-home mum doing a lot of baking? They're all very, very different circumstances now, even though it could hypothetically be the exact same skeletal structure. And that's why that never really stuck in my mind as saying, oh, this must be the answer. I thought, no, we've got to think of it more in an individualized, personal way. Because I think that's what personal training should be about.
It should be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of freeing for most people I meet, at least, to hear that. As we know, one of the biggest issues is compliance. And I've never met a person saying they just really enjoy doing external rotation with a band. Right, it's just fucking boring.
Yeah. Like, honestly, I quite enjoy doing those as exercises because you get a really nice pump in your rear delt area. That's the only reason.
Okay, you're the first one I've met, but then I mean, you're doing isometrics or doing...
Well, no, actually, like, I'll very, very rarely, but occasionally I'll go elbow on knee, dumbbell in hand, fluffing out these, just because it feels nice.
Okay, but that's a better reason than being in pain. And
of course, yeah.
Doing something wrong.
Yeah.
Which is kind of what we talked about before we started recording, like this journey we've kind of both been on, going, at least that's my interpretation of it, somewhat from being very biomechanic in our way of looking at the body, and not looking at biomechanics now, but also including the possibilities of adaptations and graded exposure and so on, along with the biomechanics.
Yeah, I think it's something that most people in the personal training field or the lifting field, biomechanics makes sense. Like, we have just this innate eye that's been built into us from many, many years of being in the gym to know, yeah, this movement looks correct. The way that person is doing a dumbbell fly looks correct because they're not coming all the way across the other side of their body. Little things like that. And then because of that, I think for most people that the entry part into their training career is then quantifying that exercise is good, that exercise is bad. That is good technique, that is incorrect technique, that is dangerous, that is safe. It fits into very neat packages. And again, like we said before, it's not necessarily a malicious thing, but we go and instruct that to others and say, oh, the way you're squatting right now, that's really bad for your back. Or that's really unsafe, or that's really dangerous now, that's incorrect technique. And that's where there's importance to make a distinction. Because I do believe there is incorrect technique when it comes to optimizing how much weight you can lift. You know, there's going to be a better technique for most people to follow for their bench press, or an individualized technique that they should be doing for their bench press. So you could then easily say that most people you see in the gym are bench pressing incorrectly because they're not doing it in the way to maximize the load lifted.
So according to their goal.
Yeah.
The context for them.
Exactly. But then when it comes down to saying that technique is incorrect for biomechanically lifting the most weight, doesn't mean that it's dangerous or unsafe or that it's in no way not a good thing, because it could have a lot of other benefits. It could just be general movement, general exercise, blood flow. It could just be part of the whole, you enjoy moving in the gym, you like being in there. Even if that person, and here's the important thing I think, even if you had that average gym goer who walks into the gym, slaps on a plate, does these guys, slaps on 2 more plates and those little partial ones, and then started doing these afterwards because they're in pain, it's not enough to say that, oh, it's the technique. And that's, I think, a very, very different thing that a lot of trainers aren't necessarily considering. Because it's very easy to package it up and say that person's using partial range of motion with rounded shoulders on the bench press. That's a recipe for impingement. That's why they're going to die now. But for all intents and purposes, that person could then do correct technique and they could still have the exact same issue. A lot of the time it may help them, but not always.
No, I mean, when people then oftentimes change something, they experience a change in the sensations, but maybe not due to the reasons they think.
Yeah.
So maybe you lower the weight.
Mm.
Maybe you do fewer reps or sets, and that dosage change, of course, will feel different.
Yeah.
But you will then explain it's because of the correcting of the technique.
Yeah.
Which could be at least one way to explain some of the differences people experience. But I think the distinction between, are we talking about pain and injury reduction, or are we talking about performance optimization? Because it's very different, the contexts of those, at least.
For sure. And they've actually been bunched together.
Yeah.
People see that as, the same thing. People believe that what's going to make you lift the most weight to perform the best is also going to be the thing that's going to keep you injury free, which is not necessarily always the case. I think there is a crossover there for a lot of what we do, but there are also going to be differences there.
And even when we look at performance, you'll see a lot of different athletes at the top level doing things in a way where most people would say, wow, why are you doing it like that?
Yeah.
I mean, people with a large scoliosis are doing a lot of pronation when running, or they have a big leg length discrepancy and so on, but still doing it in a very proper manner, or at least performing very well. Then you can also always question whether they would be able to lift or perform even better if they optimized, but it's not always the case, at least. So could you go a bit more into the adaptation graded exposure part of the focus with the training you do? At least that's my gist of following you on Instagram, that you would advocate no movement is good or bad, right or wrong.
Yeah, well, I definitely believe in it. Like, one of my philosophies, if I ever had like a philosophy in my head, is that there is no correct or incorrect movement pattern. There's nothing that's necessarily dangerous. If your body can go there with body weight, just with you moving in space, there's no reason why you can't add load to it. How much load is another question. Like, one thing I used to tell people in class a lot was things like behind the neck pull down. Like, we've been told for years, don't press, don't pull down behind the neck. It's a very old school thing that people were doing, and they're all trashed up and broken now. So we shouldn't do that. But if having your arm in this position, pulling or pressing, was a dangerous negative thing, then we would all be dying from putting a seatbelt on, or for putting your jacket on, or a long sleeve button up shirt on, things like that. And it's like, well, so where do we draw the line? The difference there is, of course, the load that we use, and you shouldn't be going extremely heavy with it, simply because it is a weaker position. Just like you wouldn't load up the same weight you use on a low bar back squat as you would on a front squat. It makes no sense. The same thing here. Like, you wouldn't necessarily load up a behind neck press same way you would a front press, just because the front is a stronger position.
Yeah, so at least if you had to load a behind the neck press or pull down to the neck, it would be relatively lighter.
Yeah.
But the kind of 1 RM percentage of the pull down to the neck could still be increased, could still be... For sure. Heavy in the relative sense. Yeah. Of course, you'll never lift the same weight.
Of course.
As in the military press when you press the neck. For most people, at least.
Yeah.
Some people will.
And I think that's very important for people to start thinking about is, let's take that behind neck press versus a front press. You're always going to be weaker, for sure. But then it's not about just saying all exercises are about load or strength increments. I mean, you can get stronger then. You should try to get stronger there. But you shouldn't necessarily see it as a pure strength power movement. What else can it provide, though? What are the other benefits that it can provide, even just from a sense of variety?
Mobility.
It could be a mobility thing. It could be just a new pathway for your brain to fire your muscles up in. It could be part of maybe someone's rehab protocol to improve their mobility or range of motion. There are many other benefits beyond just sheer sets, reps, get stronger on all movements. Therefore, it's an inferior exercise. Like, I remember I used to, when I first started talking a lot about snatch grip deadlifts many years ago, one thing I got from a few particular powerlifters was, why would you do that using so much less weight? So yes, you're using less weight externally, but internally, what does that change in position do to your body? How does it load up your lats or your whole posterior chain a little bit more despite using less weight? And then also, what is the benefits? Because there is a very, very big benefit to actually having to use less weight, just from a systemic deload perspective. And I think it comes back to the compliance discussion of, it's so boring, and I'm sure you've done this with your powerlifting as well. It's so boring to go into the gym and say, okay, I have to lift 50% today. I have to lift a lot lighter. I've got to do my deadlifts. I know I can do 300, but today I have to just do 150, which is going to feel like nothing. It's boring.
Yeah,
and people don't do it.
They don't want to, but I mean, it's probably also dependent on your training philosophy.
Yes.
For example,
yes.
I've been advocating and adhering to a high frequency program for the last many years. And of course, when you do that, you know you're not supposed to go heavy every time.
Yeah.
You will be able to. For most of my career, I've been doing squat, bench, and deadlift for at least 5 times every week. Variations of them. So I would, in particular, enjoy having variations.
Yes, for sure.
With
for sure.
Maybe a wide grip standing on the plate with a 3-second eccentric.
Yeah.
Where I would, on purpose, use a lighter weight.
Yeah, and it preserves your volume. It allows you to still push hard. But you physically can't ever use as much weight as you could on a regular deadlift, which is where the benefit lies. You actually want to have to use a lighter weight so you can still push yourself to a limit without taxing your brain so much.
Yeah, and then, as you said, if you understand the why of creating an exercise, you could choose some kind of variation that will fit the problem that you have for the individual. So you'll be better at whatever, maintaining the arch in your back while deadlifting, or keeping the bar above the midfoot in the squat, or whatever you're experiencing. But now we're going a bit into the training program, or talking frequency and so on. Maybe you could take us on a small journey on what your philosophy of a training program would be.
It's changed a lot over many, many years, but now the thing that I've found to be the most effective, not just for me, but from just honestly most people, which I think is very similar to you, what you just said, as well as frequency. I want people to train regardless of their goal, whether you're a powerlifter, bodybuilder, or a sporting athlete. I believe the more frequently you can train that specific demand on your body, the better. Like if you want to get stronger on your bench press as a powerlifter, generally speaking, the more frequently you can do it, the better. The more frequently you can expose your body to whatever the stressor is and still recover from it, the better. So everything that I try to focus around on now is, how can I increase frequency? How can I increase frequency of exposures to your body without having it taken away from your overall recovery? And that's a lot of now what I teach in classes is about how to make people choose exercises more efficiently so they stop wasting volume. Because the thing that's going to stop people the most when it comes to how frequently they can train is their recovery, which will be dependent on how much they're doing in one session. If you try to do 50 sets in a session, every single session, something is probably going to snap eventually, just because of the sheer demands on recovery. So we need to pull back on volume in some way without having it take away from your overall progression. So one thing I talk about a lot is that there's no work that you can do in one day that will ever be able to outweigh what you can do in a week, 2 weeks, month, or a year. So I start looking at it in a longer term paradigm. And then similar to, I think, what you're doing is trying to train 3 to 5 times, if not more, for each movement pattern, or for each body part as a bodybuilder, or for each drill as a sporting athlete as possible. And that's how you can really make rapid progress. Like if somebody can progress X amount by training once a week for that bench press, what if they're now doing it 3 times or 4 times a week? Now you've gone from 52 exposures in a year to 200 or more.
And I think that would be the main reason for it to be potentially more effective.
Yeah.
If you'll have plenty more times to practice the technique, I don't think the literature would point toward the frequency in itself being beneficial, but of course a higher frequency may allow for a higher volume during the week, month, year,
for sure,
and so on. And that would probably be beneficial.
Yeah, for sure. Like that's part of high frequency, less volume per session means the volume that you do is very, very good quality. So across the entire week, the number of quality reps and sets you've done is probably going to be higher than if you had done lower frequency. Because if you did 50 sets for upper body, chances are 10 of those sets are really good. The 40 were just you brain dead, flapping through the motions. So what if we did 5 sets per workout, but did 5 workouts? Now we have 25 very, very good, high quality sets, not 10 anymore. And that took me a very long time to realize for myself, because when I first started playing with high frequency, full body style training, I just had no idea how to really push to that level. I had no idea how to really get locked in with my technique. I didn't know how to choose the right exercise. I didn't really know how to push the envelope to that point, to that brink of failure, where I was getting quality work in. So I ended up doing less volume in general, but even though I was training every few days or whatever, I was doing junk volume. So of course you're going to go backwards then. So I had to learn, okay, what exercise will be better to choose, or what rep ranges or whatever it may be. Then you start making those small minor adjustments. Once you've learned the most important thing of intensity, quality reps and intensity. Yeah.
Were you still a bodybuilder at the time you started incorporating?
Yeah. So I first started playing a lot more with high frequency around 2014, 2015. That was the last couple of years I was competing as a bodybuilder. Prior to that, I was just doing a typical bro split, training each body part once a week, maybe doing for a lagging region, hit an extra pump day, and that was about it. But then, 2014, 2015, I started playing with the idea of what if I started adding in a little bit more frequency? What if I tried to hit my body more often? So the first thing I did was just said, okay, I'm training back once a week. What if I did it 4 times a week? And then I started getting really beat up because I didn't taper anything. It's like, oh, okay, that's not going to work. I better try taper on the volume. And then I had the issue of, okay, now you're actually not progressing. You're hitting it most days, but it's below that threshold of adaptation. It's below the threshold of real stress.
Below the MED.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So then I had to find, how can I raise up the dose I'm doing without necessarily increasing volume in the session? And that would be something as simple as saying, let's not do a seated cable row. Let's make it a rack pull or a deadlift. Or let's make it something like a T-bar row, which is a little bit more mechanically set up to get more volume out of the exact same volume in terms of number of sets or reps. So that's where I started realizing the importance of exercise selection, and then understanding how to identify a better exercise versus a worse exercise in that paradigm of, or in that context of progression and quality and intensity. Yeah.
That makes sense. Maybe you can tell us a bit about using some of your experiences from bodybuilding in a general population.
All right. I think there's a lot of merits to what bodybuilding can do for just about anybody. I'm always going to say that because that's how I learned. Like, I grew up in the gym doing bodybuilding stuff. All I cared about was that aesthetic look to a physique. But then there's a lot of the concepts that bodybuilders are talking about, like how much they've got this mind-muscle connection. I think that's very important for your general population. Not because they want big biceps like Arnie, but more so like it's about body ownership. How much proprioception, how much awareness does somebody have over their body? How aware are they of their arm in space or their leg in space? And things like that, which sound like a little bit airy-fairy or beyond a lot of what people take for granted, I guess. But I'm sure with what you've studied a lot with pain science in particular, in some of those, that CRPS, that complex regional pain syndrome, where it tends to come alongside this lack of awareness or ownership of that side of their body or of that body part. Now, of course, that's a very specific population of the extreme of their in such debilitating pain in their right forearm. And it comes alongside them not having ownership and associating that forearm as being their forearm. Most people we come across don't have that, but it's a continuum. It's a continuum of that being the extreme debilitating issue, and then the other extreme would be the bodybuilder of big bulging biceps. Everybody falls somewhere in that continuum of having good awareness, good proprioception, good body ownership, and quite poor. And I would say, in my opinion, everybody can afford to go a little bit more towards getting more of that clarity to their body. And in my eyes, one of the best ways to do that is to connect with your body parts and say, here is my bicep, here's my tricep, and here's how to isolate these muscles first, even if it's just for a brief period of time, and then integrate it into my everyday movements. Because I think it's part of what's being lost.
Like the muscle mapping.
Yeah, like I call it muscle mapping. I mean, but it is just about that mind-muscle connection and bringing somebody's attention and their awareness to body parts. I always find it interesting because I work with a lot of very, very high-level bodybuilders or power lifters, and I'll do some very, very simple techniques of mapping out something like their mid-back muscle, like their rhomboids. And I'll get it time and time again, like, oh my God, I never felt my rhomboids before. I say, you're a power lifter who's benching more than double body weight for reps. How have you never felt your rhomboids? Not that they should feel their rhomboids when they're bench pressing, but it's a muscle. I'm sure they feel their chest. I'm sure they feel their shoulders. I'm sure they feel other body parts. Why have they never felt this one area? And now it makes sense to me as to why they've got no muscle mass there and why they have a tendency to lose position in the bench press. Because they've got no awareness, sensation, nothing of that region. So when you tell somebody, hey, pull your scaps back and down in the bench press, they may not even know how to do that because they don't know what the muscle is that's meant to do that. You don't need an anatomy degree for it, but I do think you need some internal awareness, some internal coordination of what is going to allow me to bring that shoulder down. It's lats, it's rhomboids, there's a whole bunch of different muscles. If we have no sensation of it, no awareness, then we're setting ourselves up for failure. And it can be such a simple process of just saying, let's do a quick isolation exercise for your lats. Let's do a quick isolation exercise for your triceps or whatever it is. Not for fatigue, but just for that stimulus. So now that your lats are awake, you have a much easier time keeping that bar in close when you're deadlifting. It's not drifting away anymore. You're keeping a better position biomechanically to keep your numbers progressing. Because your sticking point is you just drift away with that barbell because you're not keeping it in tight. Despite me cueing you, scaps back and down, or chest up, or use your lats, or whatever other cue you want to think of. And that's where some of these different variations and exercises could be useful, because it's frustrating telling somebody, squeeze your shoulder blades back, squeeze them back, and they're not doing it because they don't know what it is. Now, I'm sure you come across it, and this is not just in beginners, this is in intermediate advances where you told them, hey, I want you to lift your chest up. And they'll say, okay. And that wasn't necessarily your chest. Nothing else moves, but they'll just move their head because it's just that little bit of a mismatch. But if you tell them, let's get your lats working more, or they've got proprioception there, they know how to engage that muscle, that will create the benefit that you want for their lift. Yeah.
Yeah, I think maybe you could also be very specialized in one field of movement and be very aware and having a high degree of body ownership in that specialty. For example, for a powerlifter. But if you go into any kind of other movement, it would be pretty shitty.
Yeah, then they're in danger. And that's part of how I learned most as a bodybuilder is I didn't really spend a lot of time with other bodybuilders. Or I didn't really learn much from them. They taught me a lot initially, but then when I started getting to that intermediate phase beyond being a beginner, you start hitting a lot of the roadblocks and plateaus. You've got to think, is what I'm currently doing really the best thing? And if it was, would I really be as dysfunctional as I was at the time in terms of mobility or pain or strength or muscular development and my performance? But then I would look at who are some of the most healthy, robust people out there. And it was the gymnasts, dancers, acrobats, these martial artists as well, because of how well they weren't able to just flex a muscle or isolate or feel or own one thing, but they owned everything because of their general sport. So a lot of what I started teaching people, from what I started learning about, was learning about the hip structure and a lot of lower body training from ballet dancers or dancers in general and the way that they moved. And they were doing dangerous movements from a bodybuilding powerlifting perspective. They're doing these plie squats with their heels together, toes right out, up on their ball of their feet, which is a no-no for your meniscus. You're going to snap everything and die. It's like, but they haven't. They're actually some of the healthiest people out there, the healthiest legs, the healthiest knees out there. Maybe what they're doing is actually a really good thing.
Adapting.
They're adapting, and they're doing the graded exposure. They're doing it over time, a lot of repetition. Like the more that I look to these athletes, the more I realize how lazy bodybuilders and powerlifters are for the most part, because you got an acrobat trying to learn a skill. You got like an aerialist trying to learn one of their hanging strap drills. I'll spend 8 hours at it straight in a day. And there's no wonder now why they've got such robust tendons in their shoulders, why they have such musculature to their upper body, because they're spending a lot of time in there, nailing that, practicing it, and it's in these different patterns beyond just, can I feel my middle deltoid?
Can I bench press 2.5 kilos more?
Yeah.
It's a bit more, complex.
Yeah.
And movement and the body is very
complex. Yeah.
And that's at least one of the things that I've kind of felt from following you on Instagram, that you combine different fields of movement.
Yeah.
Could you say that?
Yeah. I mean, that's a comment I get a lot from people is, you got this holistic approach, or this, it's so different, it combines a lot of different modalities, and say, well, why not? Like, it doesn't, like, I'm not a bodybuilder, and like, you're not a power lifter, even though like we've done those kinds of things in our background, but we're humans, and we're trying to optimize human performance. And then maybe for the sport of powerlifting, you hone it in to specialize for a little while, but you're still not a powerlifter when you're doing a powerlifting meet. You're still a human. So everything that can make a human better would also by default make you a better powerlifter as well. So I say, I want to learn from as many different modalities as I can, and I'll incorporate whatever I can from other people, and then specialize in my sport of powerlifting or bodybuilding or whatever it is. I think people have fallen into the trap of categorizing, saying you're a gymnast, you're a swimmer, you're a bodybuilder, you're a powerlifter. You should only be doing these kinds of things, and everything else is stupid, or everything else is irrelevant for your sport. As a bodybuilder or powerlifter, maybe we wouldn't do the exact same volume, intensity, frequency that an acrobat or ballet dancer would do for the lower body per se. But there are some things they're doing that we can start to sprinkle in. If I did all of what they would do, then I would no longer be doing powerlifting, I'd be doing dancing.
Yeah, you have like the set principle.
Yeah,
of course you have to be somewhat specific. But,
exactly.
But let's say for 5-10% of what you do.
Exactly right. The accessory stuff, the pre-pump, the activation stuff, or just the general mobility warm-up, just general life stuff out of the gym as well. What else can I incorporate to make that specific powerlifting, bodybuilding, sporting goal? What can I make that better? What will make that better is specificity, which is already being done, but also being a better human by hitting all the different facets, making sure your coordination is on point, making sure your balance, your proprioception, your overall movement quality across fields outside of a bench press are really good as well. It can only benefit in my eyes. So that's where I really get excited to learn from those people. And that's where a lot of what I do, people say, oh, it's weird or it's unorthodox. If you don't understand the context of it, it seems unorthodox, but now I'm sure most people say, oh, that makes so much sense. Why have I not already been doing that? So to speak.
And it could be because, at least for a big part of what you see in the exercise community, if we can call it that, you don't have the explanation of why.
Exactly.
And you have the constant search for the magic, quick fix.
Yeah.
The one solution.
Yeah.
But maybe sometimes, or a lot of the times, the hard work, the variation, doing a lot of the boring stuff, if you can call that, is part of the solution.
For sure.
There is no magic one thing to do.
Exactly. And that's where I think education is so important. It's the more that we can promote explanation, deeper thought, answering those whys in articles, in workshops, in working with people in a more hands-on, closer setting, the better. Because you can only convey so much on an Instagram post, on social media. Even in an article, you can only convey so much. That's why it's about putting as much out there to get people interested, so they start asking those questions. And that's what part of like my mission is, to get people thinking about those things. So they'll see an exercise on Instagram like, oh, that's quite interesting. That's quite a curious topic. Most people initially, they'll just take it and run. They won't think more about it. But over time, they'll start to ask, why does this feel so good? Or I want to learn more about it. I want to become a bit more educated in understanding these processes. And that's where they start to walk up that ladder towards understanding how the body works or why these things are chosen the way that they are.
And becoming less rigid.
Yeah, becoming less rigid, becoming more free thinking, and continually trying to improve. Because even if they have a really good explanation as to why this may work or when it's not appropriate or when it is appropriate, I hope they still continue to ask, but could it be even better? Could there still be something that's missing? Could there still be something to improve this even more? That's what I want people starting to think about more and more and more with their training.
Do you get the comments on like, oh, you should never recommend an exercise like this? It's really dangerous.
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure. I get that. I get that every single day. I get that multiple times. So people saying, "Hey, that shoulder thing you did, that's really, really, really dangerous, and you shouldn't be doing that. How dare you do that in your realm of an influencer, as an educator? How can you recommend that?"
I have a responsibility, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. And first of all, I say, well, I don't really, because I'm just putting up what I'm doing in the gym. I'm putting up what I enjoy doing. It in no way says that you have to do it. I could also say, hey, it's natural selection, you know, those who can't. Exactly. If you can't do it, well, that's intention. That's the point. But more so, it's about, again, like there isn't a necessarily dangerous thing. It's about understanding, hey, here's what maybe the body's capable of. What if you can't do that right now, which a lot of people can't for any movement. Like right now, maybe let's say I can't squat. Does that mean when I see somebody else squatting, I should say, you shouldn't recommend that? It's like, I should be thinking, wow, that person can squat so effortlessly and I can't right now. I could perceive it as squat is dangerous, or I could perceive it as, what do I need to do to be able to get to that point? That's what people should be thinking of when they see something that seems dangerous or scary. They say, wow, that person can do all this crazy stuff that I can't do, and that I get pain thinking about doing that because of my old injury or because of what I've learned in the past. But then, you know what? That human can physically do it. What do I need to do to be able to be in that state? That's a very, very exciting way to be thinking in my eyes. And that's what I think people should be excited about and start thinking about more. Is no, you should not that you shouldn't do this or this is scary and dangerous, but also that's impressive. If I wanted to do that, which some people might not, but if I did want to do that, what do I have to do to be able to get there?
What would be the journey?
What would be the journey? What would be the program? What would be the process? How can I get started? And go from there. That's exciting. That's motivating for somebody.
But I guess it's kind of back to what you said before, that we like as human beings to categorize.
Mm-hmm.
To put it in simple terms, like this is bad, this is good.
Yeah.
Correct, incorrect.
Yeah.
Healthy, unhealthy. And it's the same with most things we do.
Mm-hmm.
Nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't talked about that yet, but
yeah.
It's, at least from my experience, the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
You have to avoid these foods. You have to eat a lot of this.
Yeah.
And it's the same specifics of it.
Yeah.
Do you have like a nutrition philosophy?
I don't even know what you define as a philosophy.
I don't know.
Yeah. I eat food, and I used to be very regimented. In terms of seeing things as good or bad. Because when you get a little bit of knowledge, that becomes a very dangerous thing. Because you think, oh, this works for me and it makes sense from the very, very small amount of knowledge I have. So I'm going to start recommending it to others, just like training. You know, like that exercise hurt me or was dangerous. And it makes sense as to why it did. I'm going to tell other people that they shouldn't do it either. So I used to be very specific, saying, well, you shouldn't have carbs at this time of day. You shouldn't eat these kinds of foods. You should be avoiding this. You should be doing these different protocols. But then as my understanding on nutrition, on biology, on biochemistry, as those things improve, I was like, oh, shit, I'm saying a lot of very stupid things. I'm doing a lot of things that maybe they're not stupid, but they were irrelevant. And they were probably creating more problems than they were fixing.
Do you have an example of that?
Gluten. Very simple one. Many years ago, and this is a common one that's there in the industry so much. People are like, gluten is bad. You should go gluten-free because of the Franken wheat that's out there that's so much higher in gluten these days that the body's not adapted for. It tells a very, very nice story. Where we can probably find literature saying that the wheat that we grow today is very different to the wheat that was grown 100 odd years ago. And that's why you're dying. And this is the compound found in gluten, a protein called zonulin, that will open up the tight junctions in your digestive tract and create leaky gut and give you autoimmunity and give you all these issues, despite not having celiac disease. If I tell you that's like, oh, fuck, gluten, I better stay very clear from gluten. And I still do believe that for some people, that is important. Maybe if they were suffering the autoimmune, if they're a very, very specific subset of people, yeah.
But I mean, that's like a very
small percentage.
And then also you might add that when you do studies on people at least claiming to be gluten sensitive, blind them to whether they
they can't tell. They can't tell. So the important thing was, I guess the important lesson is, for years I was doing that, and I was preaching that. I was preaching it because it worked for me, because I removed the grains and the glutens, and I was like, oh, I feel great. I feel leaner. I'm getting leaner. I'm progressing. But the question is, was it the gluten or was it the other variables that I wasn't considering in that context? Maybe I decreased calories. Maybe I changed my other aspects to my health. Maybe it was something that I was able to comply with more because I was excited about it. It's the exact same thing about the whole pain process of, hey, I give a client rehab exercise 1 and they feel better. Was it because of the exercise, or was it because of the decrease in load, the decrease in volume? Was it because of the belief that they would get better?
The feeling of safety for having an explanation.
Exactly. So that I think is what...
doubt or being fearful. And I mean, it's so difficult. But that's like the human mind of being able to doing the post hoc, proctor hoc.
Exactly.
Reasoning of
So
post hoc analysis is very difficult not to fall into automatically.
For sure. And that's where that was me as a younger, more mature person, understanding a little bit and then not really taking enough time to think about it more globally and saying, hang on, what else could be at play here? What else could be making me feel better? Or is it enough that I feel better for them to tell everybody else that they should be doing the same thing? So now I am very different in how I would talk about gluten. I'll say the exact same thing of, hey, this is what technically could happen, but it's still not enough reason to say that we should all go gluten-free. And if you do feel better going gluten-free in this example, ask yourself, was it removing gluten, or was it other variables of compliance to a diet? Or was it maybe because you got more active, maybe because of the placebo effect in your mind, which is huge. That whole placebo of you thinking about you're going to get an issue then being created, or even associating certain issues as good or bad, like something like bloating. You're going to decrease your bloat if you take out these foods. Is bloating really a bad thing? Who knows? I think it's quite normal or regular, in my opinion, if you inhale a pizza, to feel a little bit gassy afterwards. Just from the sheer amount of food going in, not because of the gluten, not because your gut's fucked, but because you had a big influx of calories, of macronutrients, of everything. And some of it's going to sit there and ferment a little bit. But you know what? It'll pass in a day. And you're no worse off for it. So that was part of my re-education, was literally going through instances where I had to eat the gluten, the dangerous foods, and then realizing the day after, oh, I didn't die. I'm still here. Like maybe I slept a bit funny that night. Maybe I had some more congestion. But then the more you did it, the more you realize that really happened because of the gluten. Was it a psychological thing? Was it just a random occurrence? Yeah. So then you start becoming your own experiment, and you get more information to make a more informed decision, because now the informed decision is gluten is not as bad as we once thought it was, or that many people are saying it is. The same thing with carbs or keto or fat or whatever it is you want to, whatever other camp you might want with nutrition, is that none of these things are inherently good or bad. Artificial sweetness, not good or bad. They're just other things you can add in. And it's more important to follow the strict rule. It's more important to first understand the mechanisms of action of some of these things, how they're meant to work. And then more importantly is then doing your own N of 1 experiment. Saying, I'm going to start having more sweeteners. And if it makes you feel like shit, it makes sense as to why it might. I might pull back a little bit, maybe not cut it out because it's not necessarily going to kill me, but I'm still not going to recommend everybody else should cut it out either. You've got to experiment with your own body. And then only then can you make more informed decisions, as long as you can back it up intelligently with a lot of good evidence.
Yeah, and from looking at the evidence, you could probably eat most things, but you have to, as in the same way of we talked about movement, look at the dose. And then, of course, if something doesn't fit with your goal, you can cut it out in that sense. But some of the main rules, if you can call them that, of thermodynamics and so on, goes for everyone. I remember for a couple of days ago, Spencer Nadolsky put on a meme, like if you have a blood type of this and that, you would have to have caloric deficit to lose weight. Yeah. And if you have this blood type,
you need a caloric deficit still.
Instead of being very specific with your blood type or body type and so on, most of the basics would be somewhat the same for
sure. Yeah, so that was probably the only unifying thing I think about is I care about calories and I care about protein. For most people, I also care about carbohydrate content being sufficient to fuel their training. Outside of that, anything goes. And then I told people more so at that point, then you can make your decision. You can make up whether you want to have dairy or not. Because maybe you find you don't like it. That's fine. Don't have it. Maybe you
focus on adherence.
Yeah. And that's what I care about more than anything else. Maybe, even though it may not be optimal from a micronutrient perspective, this person feels better having pizza every single day because it helps them adhere to the rules of the caloric deficit, protein, carbohydrate. Cool, knock yourself out and do that as long as everything else is matched up. It's a very much a freeing way of thinking. It takes away a lot of the stress that people have. And then if they want to, they can look into a blood type diet. Then if they want to, they can look into ketogenic because they're interested in it and they're wondering, what is one thing I might be able to take away from this? Like, for instance, I have found that, and this is, I've got to put a big disclaimer, this is complete bro science, but with people who tend to be blood type A, I have found they struggle with a lot of red meat. Now, I don't think it's because of their blood type. I just found it very anecdotally. I still wouldn't tell all blood type A's don't have red meat. I'd say, hit your protein, hit your calories, hit your macronutrients, adhere to your diet. Once you've done that, if you really want to, for a little icing on top, try experiment, red meat out, more white meat in, go for it. If it makes you feel better, keep doing it. It still wouldn't be enough for me to say it's because of your blood type.
What have made you to find that correlation between those two factors?
Yeah, well, I literally just read one of those blood type books. I was curious because I love to, even though I don't believe in these ideas per se, I am always curious to look at what are these doctors, what are these people saying about lectins or grains or gluten or whatever, and I'm curious. And then I read about the blood type A in this whatever book it was, saying, hey, you should be avoiding red meat. And then I started looking, and I had a lot of clients at the time who randomly said to me, I don't like red meat, it doesn't sit well with me. And I was curious, hey, what blood type are you? And not all, but a lot of them were saying, oh, I'm blood type A. But, okay. I found no other correlation to any other blood type stuff at all. But I found that and I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. I wonder what would happen if, for the next blood type, next person who came to me, if they're following everything else perfectly, if I then said, you're blood type A, let's remove red meat and put in white meat, just for curiosity. And sometimes I felt better. And I said, okay, it could be 10 other reasons still. And said, if you like doing that, keep doing it. If you want to have a steak as well. But I would only make that kind of call only out of genuine curiosity for that person if they wanted to play with it, and only after they've met all the base prerequisites. And the industry is backwards. Yeah. The industry goes, ooh, sexy, cool new thing as to why you're fucked up. It's blood type. And they forget everything else. And that's the danger. And that's why I very specifically don't talk about those things as much, because it's a really shiny new object that appeals to people's ADD, and they forget about the basics. They forget about the fundamentals.
You could probably earn a lot if you can sell a new blood type.
Of course, yeah. And that's what drives, honestly, a lot of these different ideas. It's the monetary value there. It may not be necessarily a malicious thing. People saying, I'm going to concoct the next fad to make a lot of money. That does definitely happen out there in the industry. But that's where people start believing they're impressed. Like, oh, this worked for me. I'm going to write a book about it. And it sounds sexy. Oh, making a lot of money from it. I'm going to keep this snowball going. Keep this going more and more and more. And that's where it becomes out of hand and dangerous. And that's where you have people falling into these camps and following things blindly, and not getting results, getting frustrated. And then as a practitioner, we have to unpack that and say, hey, it's not your blood type that's fucking you up. It's because you're eating too many calories. Hey, it's not because you didn't do this one exercise as to why you're in pain. It's because of everything else that's going on in your life. The re-education process is what you probably experience a lot of challenge with as well. When somebody has such a deep belief about their blood type or gluten or training in general. Yeah. That's a big challenge. And that's why I'm a lot more careful these days about what I do talk about and what I do put out there in terms of my content, because I don't want to be associated as someone who is putting out a blood type diet or putting out don't eat gluten or whatever, because of the impacts it can have on someone's psychology. The impacts it can have on somebody's then symptoms that are very much psychological, placebo-based. And then they start searching for an answer and they become very unhappy and frustrated because they're not able to get results because they forgot the basics. They forgot about calories. They forgot about macronutrients. They forgot about just general movement and exercise. Yeah.
I totally agree with what you're saying. Now I'm just wondering, how does this fit with the recommendation of the pomegranate?
Right. So what about the pomegranate?
Like, you recommended it quite a lot, as far as I see.
Yeah.
And it seems like this could be understood as you need to eat this one fruit.
For sure.
If I have to kind of misunderstand it.
Yeah, let's play devil's advocate here. Let's say you come onto Coach Eugene Teo's Instagram. He's talking about pomegranate pumps. He's having a pomegranate pre-workout. Yeah, he's a pomegranate coach. And he has all these followers putting up pictures of them eating pomegranate too. It's like, it's a cult almost. I've got to do it too. It must be a thing because he's got all these followers. He's a position of influence, and he's eating it as well. So that can very much be what we're talking about, is a problem of type A, of gluten, or whatever else it may be as the one answer. And that's why I'm very careful in how I talk about it with people. When they then ask, I say, okay, now here's why I'm doing it. And it doesn't break the rules of thermodynamics. It doesn't break the rules of macronutrients or anything like that. I do it because there is literature supporting its benefits for vasodilation or blood pressure or for performance and endurance. Does that mean you should be having it? No, but I like the taste of it.
Yeah, I mean,
So
I don't think you present it in a way where it's the magic solution.
Exactly.
To everything, but I mean,
exactly.
Could you follow the content and believe it's important to eat it?
So could a follower
be led to
for sure, that they very much could. And that's where the danger is. That's where someone could see an exercise I put up and say, oh my God, that's what I have to do for my shoulder. That's what I got to do for my squat depth or for my glutes. I have to do this one thing. So that's where it's always hard to, but I'm always trying to put out the explanation, putting out the resource. So for example, with pomegranate, I have a very in-depth video on my website that's freely available to say, go look at this. And here I am talking about how, why, what to do with pomegranate. And it's like a 20-minute, half-hour long video saying, here's a pomegranate, here's how I eat it. But here is why you might not want it as well, and going deeper, which is honestly the best that we can always do as practitioners. We can only just say, look, here's something that could be useful for you, and here it is presented in a very enticing way. I hope that is enough to inspire you to do your own research. And I'm going to always say, do your own research as well. At that point, the ownership now becomes on, I guess, the person to hope that they do more and more looking into it. And that's what we should be doing. I tell people, when you come to my classes as well, you come to my workshop, question what I say, question what I do. Monday after the seminar, don't jump straight in to start doing everything you learned from coach and say, this is the answer. Do it, but critique it and form your own opinion and say, yeah, you showed me this technique that looked really cool on the day and it worked for me on the day. But now with 4 of my clients, it broke their spine. Like that they are now paraplegics. So maybe I should stop doing this. Like I want people to have that thought process. And that's always going to be that balancing act of how do you present something that's going to be interesting, but also thought provoking. That's what I want. Yeah. People thinking about more is getting some more thought.
Misunderstand.
Yeah.
Things we put out.
Yeah.
Even though we try to be mindful of what we put out. Who is your biggest inspiration?
It depends in what. So I can say, top of my head, biggest inspiration out there is the comedian Kevin Hart, who you probably know. I never followed any of his comedy acts when he was doing all of them. I only got interested in him late 2017 because I stumbled across his biography, his book. And I realized, because in my mind before that, he was just the guy who made a lot of money. He was a successful actor. He was in movies. He had his, I didn't even really know what he did. I was like, hey, he's successful. And then I realized once I went through his book and I learned more about him, I was like, whoa, one thing, he deserves every part of his success. And he's a hard worker, and he's much more than a comedian. He's much more than an actor. He's transcended. And he's continually, even though he's at that point now of what you could deem a success, he is still working way harder than I ever will. And he's got this mindset of growth and of being genuinely excited about things. And he's very, very open-minded, and he supports others. For example, like, when I see this a lot in the industry, where people are trying to take each other down, or they get jealous. They're like, how dare you, like, you know, look at my follower. Eugene, you got all these followers, and you're posting this shit about pomegranate. You're posting these random circuit exercises. How dare you do? How dare you make money off this? And you know, you're a charlatan. You're lying to the industry. Blah 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 blah. Instead, what I think should be done more in the industry is look at what you're doing. It's incredible. I want that. I want to be better than that. Maybe I don't agree with what you say, but how can I put myself to your position and then spread an even better message? I want to outperform you, not for ego, but because you motivate me. Even though I don't agree with the thing that you say, it motivates me to be able to see what you can do. Like I see a lot of what you do. You've got this podcast. You talk a lot about, in a very, very intelligent way, about pain science. You've got a lot of coaches people who work for you. It's like, wow, I wish I had that. I want to now work even harder to create that for myself, so I can then do a lot of what you do on an even bigger scale. It'd be fun for me. And that's part of his mindset, which I get so much inspiration for, which is very different to what a lot of people are in any industry, where it's full of jealousy, full of hate, full of just people not wanting to support each other. Like I love seeing other people succeed because it inspires me to say, wow, that's what's possible. Just like training. Like, look at this guy doing this random ass exercise. Look, that's so cool. And then, how do I get there? What process do I have to take to be able to achieve that, get beyond that, improve upon it, or fall short of it? Who cares? Like, he was one of the reading that book was the thing that made me start touring the most. Okay. Before then, I was happy touring around Australia and just doing a few events here and there. And after I read that, I realized, whoa, I've got this potential to reach more people and help more people and impact more people more positively. Why am I being comfortable here in Australia when I could start coming to a place like Denmark and being able to impact at least 20, 30 new people who are then going to be able to spread a more positive message? Maybe they're going to see what I've done and be like, wow, look what Eugene is doing. He's this random kid from Australia. I want to do that too. What do I have to do to be able to get to that level? And I see that a lot. I'll get at least a quarter of my students in workshops saying to me, I love what you do, Eugene. I want to do this as well. Or I want to do more than this. And I want to be in this position, not for money, but more because they know they've got something they want to share and they're so passionate. I'm like, that's cool. That's so exciting that I can have that impact on somebody. And I say, I hope I see you in a couple of years, if not sooner, in Australia, because you're touring around now as well. That's different because most people will be like, you're going to be my competition. I need to cut you down. I need to send you the wrong way out. You need to be below me always because I'm better than you. I can't ever envision having you as a competitor. I'm like, I want that. I want that because that's how we all grow. That's how I get pushed to improve more as well. That's how I get motivated. And I think that's a very positive energy to be putting out there in life, not just in the fitness industry or business sense. And I think whatever your industry is, if you have that kind of mindset, good things will happen. Yeah.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
What have been the best advice you have received?
Ooh. Man, you threw me on the spot with that one. I've received a lot of good advice. Probably something that sticks out to me, probably because we've been speaking about it, is to always be asking why. Is always asking explanation and always try to critique, but also do it very, very respectfully. Watch your tongue, watch your words, watch your gut reaction to something. So when somebody presents an argument to you, you want to ask why, but you also want to sit in it for a moment and try to put yourselves into their shoes. I guess if there was one piece of advice that I have received, not directly from anybody, but by reading like the Dale Carnegie How to Win Friends and Influence, it was one of the first books I ever read, was put yourself in someone else's shoes. See it from their eyes. So when you present an argument to me, no matter how ridiculous I may see it as, no matter how hateful I may see it as, I want to spend at least a moment to put myself into your shoes and try to imagine it from your perspective. Because then I might realize where I'm going wrong, or I might just understand why you see it that way, even if I don't agree with it. At least I can understand. Again, we need more of that. People are very quick to react in life. I used to be a very reactive person to everything that was out there, and that was only a negative energy for me. Now I'm a lot calmer, I'm a lot more level-headed, because whenever somebody comes at me with something, I'm saying to myself, is it really an attack on me? Is it more saying something about them? How can I put myself in their shoes? What kind of person would I have to be able to say something like that or act in that way? And that comes back to, I guess, that Instagram thing of people saying, this is dangerous, this is wrong, and trying to beat you down. Like, I could react and say, you're a fucking idiot, fuck you, look what I do, look what you don't do. Or I could say, ooh, let me try to picture it in their mind. Where are they coming from? What are they saying? Like you spoke to me about maybe 6 months ago or even more on Instagram, September, in response to one of my posts on head position. Now, I could easily just say, you're an idiot. Look what I do. Look at the results. It's clearly I'm better than you. Or instead I could say, why would you ask me that? What must your background be? Why must you have that kind of opinion? And what can I learn from it? And that's a really, really good thing, because I can learn a lot from someone like you. I can say, okay, you've got this pain science background. You're looking at it from a very different lens, and you're poking a lot of very, very legitimate holes in what I'm presenting. And that's a really good thing. And that will only come from going into that environment, trying to understand your context and not being so hot to react.
Which is difficult.
It's difficult. It takes a lot of patience, takes a lot of deep breaths. It takes a lot of screwing it up as well. But I just realized I had no time for that anymore. I had no time for arguing and reacting, because that would then sit in me for days. And I'd be like, oh, I showed him. I showed that guy. Like, no, you didn't. They're still out there. There's still hundreds other out there you have to prove to now. And while you're proving yourself to them, what are you getting done yourself? Nothing. If somebody gets in your mind like that by a hateful comment or just a critiquing general interest comment, then they've won, essentially, because they've disrupted what you're trying to do anyway, and they've derailed your train of thought, which probably means your train of thought, your idea, wasn't that good to begin with anyway. So they are right. They are correct. So it became a very self-fulfilling prophecy for me to realize a lot of the errors I made as a person, a lot of errors I made as a coach or as an influencer or educator, whatever you want to put it out as, but then how to improve upon that and how to present a more concise message that didn't have those same gaps. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. What do you believe in to be true that most people disagree with?
What do I believe in? It would be, to keep it more on topic with what we've been speaking about, it would be more about this whole biomechanical model of training, of movement, of performance, of also pain, is that most people would believe that there is a biomechanical explanation for everything. There's a biomechanical explanation as to why you can't improve your squat. You have to improve your technique. You've got to squat more. You've got to get more muscle mass. That's going to be true, but there are also going to be other variables at play. There's going to be so many other variables at play that we should be considering. beyond pure biomechanics. A lot of people look at what I do from a biomechanical lens and say, oh, you're doing a course called muscle mechanics. It must be a biomechanics course. It barely is. Like, we spend some time talking about biomechanics and discussing that and showing examples of that. But really, it's more of an introduction to everything the human body is capable of and exploring those unorthodox or different ideas to movement, to training, to strength, to pain, that people aren't necessarily considering. I think the industry now with pain science and where it's at now is taking a very, very positive leap. Now that we're understanding a lot more about just this role the brain, the nervous system plays in controlling everything that we do, we're making very, very positive leaps. And probably in a year or two's time, I won't be saying this is like a very different thing. Everybody would be agreeing with it. But right now, it's still a lot of wars where I'm saying, hey, your issue may no longer be a biomechanical one, if it ever was. The reason why you can't grow muscle mass here may not just be biomechanical. The reason why you have pain here may not just be biomechanical. There are other factors to be considered, which is weird to a lot of people.
Yeah. It's unusual in the way we think about the body and especially about pain and movement in society. If we were to round off the conversation with 3 recommendations for people regarding their training and nutrition, how would they sound in your perspective?
3 recommendations.
I know it's broad, but I mean,
it would
priority.
My priority with people that I talk about a lot nowadays is to stop wasting volume. Whatever volume means to people, wasted sets, wasted exercises, wasted efforts, wasted time. Like, a big factor I consider with people is if I can just spend less time in the gym, I'm quite happy with that. That's a big win for me, to condense and to reduce as much as possible. Because in its very simplistic sense, it means if you're doing less in the gym now, you can do more tomorrow. You can train even more frequently if you love doing that. So we would try to stop wasting volume and work more efficiently. What other recommendations? It would be always to try to seek an understanding. How, why, mechanisms. When somebody comes to you with a claim of this is a good exercise for shoulders, not for your shoulders, but just like to grow your shoulders, ask or seek to understand, have they provided a mechanism of action? Have they provided a reasoning, as unconventional as it may be? Have they at least given some kind of logic as to why they're saying what they're saying? Or is it just based on them saying, I'm a position of authority, so I know better? So when a physio comes to you and says, oh, you've got lower back pain, it's because your disc has slipped out and is pinching a nerve, that's a very, very, that could be correct for sure. I'm sure that may be playing into it, but you should also ask, good logic behind it, it makes some sense. Is it really all there is? Is there more options out there? People should take charge of their bodies with training, nutrition, whatever, to seek out the mechanism, to seek out the how, to seek out the why. So like nutrition, I say to you, don't eat gluten. Have I then provided you with mechanisms? Have I provided you with sound logic and thought processes? And can you deconstruct it and pull it apart and find a better answer? Or maybe you should follow it. Who knows? So that would be just critical thinking, done respectfully as well. Final one for training, nutrition. Ooh, I think you're stumping me. Because those 2 things are part of how what I really talk about a lot with people and try to promote as a message. I'm just struggling to think of a third.
Something about rest or...
Well, I mean,
we haven't talked too much about rest or sleep.
Sleep when you're dead, mate. You sleep when you're dead. Sleep is the people who are broke, okay? Anything you can do to conserve your sleep would be absolutely incredible. And that goes into the conversation of preservation of volume, preservation of stress, so you can focus more on recovery, because it's your training is only going to be as good as your recovery allows. So anything you can do to promote more rest and recovery is better. It's weird because I think on one hand, people are lazy. Like I just said before, bodybuilders, powerlifters, we're quite lazy in what we do. But at the same time, we need to be resting. I think if there's one big takeaway from that though, is that we need to be doing something as a direct active thing to be promoting rest. People think resting is just I didn't train today. I took a day off, or I did a lighter workout. That's not rest. That's not recovery. Recovery is actually doing something specific to promote recovery, which I think is missing in a lot of the health industry. Like I ask a lot of the people who come to my courses, they're typically personal trainers or people in the industry. And I say, okay, what do you do for fun? Like, oh, my hobby is I do martial arts on the weekend. So it's a good hobby, great. But what do you really do like to completely relax and promote recovery? When are you not doing something that's taking away from your resource? And like, oh, you know what? I read a lot. Like, oh, great. So what are you reading? Like, I'm reading this textbook. I'm studying this. But that's still not really recovery. Like, yeah, you're not training anymore, but your mind's still training. Your brain's still training. You're not really switching off. You're not really getting that reset button where you're completely disconnecting. That's part of like what I play. I like to play little just video games on my phone. That's a quick thing I can take with me everywhere. I do a lot of coloring books, something I can take with me anywhere. Things that are so far out of training, nutrition, health, studying, that lets you switch off more, I think are important for people to be thinking about. Yeah.
Cool. If people want to find out more about you, where can they go?
Easiest place, point of contact, is to look me up on Instagram at Coach Eugene Teo. That's it. I've got websites. I have other things out there, but it's just start there. Don't bother going anywhere else to try to find things. Just start there, dip your feet in, see if you like it, see if you hate it, and go from there. And if you hate it, then maybe don't hate it. I hope you don't. I hope you don't hate it. But if you do, I hope you have a good reason. I hope we can talk about why that is. Hope we can have a discussion, because I do welcome that. I always talk to people as much as I can, but I hope it provokes some thought.
Thanks for being in the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
And to potential English-speaking listeners, thank you for listening. And I'll switch into Danish for a second, og vil sige tak for, at du har lyttet med. Og håber på, at du selvfølgelig har nyt samtalen, hvis du har hørt den på iTunes. Så smid en anmeldelse, som hjælper med at få podcasten med ud, og hvis du ser med på YouTube derovre, så smid en kommentar herunder.
Herunder.